Tonight, we step into a story unlike any other. Not a legend passed down through centuries. Not a tale born from forgotten ruins or lost kingdoms. No, tonight's story is something closer, something modern, something that still breathes in the walls of a house that stands to this very day. It is the story of a family who wanted nothing more than peace and of the shadows that answered instead. It is the story of whispers in the night, of doors that creak without reason, of hands that clap in the dark where no one stands. And it is the story of the two people who dared to face it, Ed and Lorraine Warren, names spoken in both reverence and fear. What you are about to hear is not simply a ghost story. It is the Conjuring. So settle into the quiet. Let the stillness of the night surround you. And as the darkness gathers at the edge of the room, imagine just for a moment that you have stepped into that lonely farmhouse in Rhode Island, where every shadow waits to be heard. Because this is where our tale begins. It began, as many haunted stories do, with a house. But not just any house. A lonely farmhouse standing in the Rhode Island countryside, weathered by decades of wind and rain. Its timbers sagged with age, its windows stared like half-closed eyes, and its walls seemed to lean forward, as though listening to every footstep, every word, every secret that passed within. The year was 1971. The world outside bustled with new beginnings, but here, in these quiet fields, time felt heavy, almost unwilling to move forward. And into this place came the Perron family. Roger Perron, his wife Carolyn, and their 5 daughters drove along the winding road that led to their new home. The girls pressed their faces to the glass, watching the house grow larger in the distance. To them, it looked like a dream, a sprawling farmhouse with acres of land to play on, hidden away from the noise of towns and cities. A place for laughter, for growing up, for new beginnings. When they arrived, the front yard was alive with movement. The girls tumbled from the car, racing to the porch, their voices echoing in the morning air. Roger smiled at the sight of them, their excitement infectious. Carolyn stepped from the car slowly, her eyes sweeping across the fields, the weathered boards, the sagging shutters. She pressed a hand to her chest and whispered, almost to herself, "This is it. This is our home." The house loomed above her in silence. The first hours passed in a flurry of unpacking, boxes stacked against the walls, furniture dragged across creaking floors. Laughter echoed through the halls as the girls claimed their rooms, voices overlapping in cheerful argument. But beneath the laughter, there was something else. The house seemed to groan under their presence, every footstep stirring echoes that did not belong to them. The walls creaked with a voice of their own, and when the wind slipped through the cracks, it did not sound like wind at all, but like whispers, faint and hollow. The family was too busy to notice. They were beginning a new life after all, but not everyone was convinced. The Perrons had brought with them a dog, Sadie, who had always been loyal, playful, eager. But when Roger called her into the house, she froze at the threshold, her ears pressed flat, her tail tucked low. She whimpered, staring into the shadow of the open door. "Come on, girl," Roger coaxed, patting his knee. But Sadie did not move. The girls called for her, their sweet voices urging her inside, but the dog only lowered herself to the ground, whining softly. Her body shook. At last she turned her head away, as though unable to even look at the house. Roger sighed, giving up with a shrug. "She'll come around," he said. But Carolyn frowned. Animals, she had always believed, saw things people could not, and already the first seed of unease had been planted. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned violet, Roger forced open the heavy door to the cellar. Dust spiraled upward, catching the last of the light. The air that rushed out was damp, stale, and sour, like the breath of something long sealed away. The stone steps creaked under his boots as he descended. The cellar was wide, low-ceilinged, with thick beams holding the weight of the house above. Broken furniture lay piled in corners. Old trunks, covered in cobwebs, leaned against the walls, and everywhere the smell sharp, earthy, and rotten. "Plenty of room for storage," Roger said when he came back up, his voice cheerful but his skin pale. Carolyn said nothing. She had caught the smell too. Night came quickly in the countryside. The girls, exhausted from the day, settled into their new rooms. Roger kissed them goodnight, his smile tired but proud. Carolyn lingered at the doorways, watching each of her daughters as they drifted to sleep. For a moment, everything was still. But then, the silence changed. The youngest daughter stirred in her bed. A frown creased her forehead as she felt something at her feet. Slowly, her eyes opened. The room was dark, shadows stretching long across the walls. Something tugged at her leg. She gasped, sitting up, clutching her blanket. Again, the pull gentle at first, then harder. She cried out, her scream echoing down the hall. Carolyn rushed in, gathering her daughter into her arms, whispering comfort. She checked the sheets, the bed, the floor. Nothing. No one. Only shadows, leaning closer as though they too were listening. That was their first night in the farmhouse, and the house had already spoken. The cellar door had always been heavy. It groaned when the latch was lifted, creaked like a voice when it swung open. The girls avoided it instinctively, skirting past in the hallway, whispering about the darkness below. Even in daylight, the air that rose from the steps was cold, damp, and sour, a breath of earth that never seemed to end. Roger told them it was nothing more than old stone in storage, but the smell lingered, sharp enough to make the throat sting. One evening after supper, the family gathered in the parlor. The girls played quietly with dolls and cards, Carolyn folding laundry nearby, Roger oiling a lantern. The house creaked with its usual restlessness. Then came the crash. From below, a shuddering thud echoed through the floorboards, as though something heavy had been dropped. The girls froze. Carolyn's hands stilled. Roger set the lantern aside and rose, his brow furrowed. "Stay here," he said, though his voice betrayed unease. He took a flashlight and made his way to the cellar door. The latch was colder than it should have been. He pushed it open, the hinges wailing, and descended slowly into the dark. The beam of his flashlight cut across stone walls, cobwebs trembling like veins of silver, and piles of broken furniture slumped in the corners. The air grew thicker with every step, pressing against his chest. "Hello?" Roger called softly, though he knew no one was there. His voice bounced back to him, thin and hollow. He swept the light across the cellar floor. Old trunks leaned against the wall. A rocking chair sat broken, its legs splintered. A mirror leaned crooked, its surface fogged and cracked. And in the farthest corner, something moved. The light flickered. Roger stepped closer, heart pounding, only to find a sheet draped over a trunk, shifting slightly in the draft. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Still, the unease clung to him as he climbed the stairs. "Nothing down there," he told Carolyn, forcing a smile. "Just junk." But when he closed the door, the smell followed him. That night, Carolyn dreamed. She stood in the cellar alone, her breath clouding in the cold air. In the shadows, a woman's figure lingered, her face hidden, her neck bent at an unnatural angle, her hands cradling something small, something squirming, something crying. The figure lifted its head. Its eyes were black, its mouth stretched into a grin. And then the sheet from the trunk rose in the air, flung aside by unseen hands, and the figure rushed toward her. Carolyn woke screaming, drenched in sweat. By morning, she discovered the bruises. Purple marks bloomed across her arms and legs, round and dark as if left by fingers gripping too hard. She stared at them in the mirror, her breath trembling. "Did you fall?" Roger asked when he noticed. She shook her head. I don't remember." But in her heart, she remembered the dream. She remembered the grip of invisible hands, and she knew the bruises were no accident. The farmhouse grew heavier with each passing day. At times, the smell of rot filled the kitchen, then vanished without cause. Cold drafts curled around door frames though the windows were shut. Shadows lengthened where no light should cast them. And always the cellar door loomed in the hall, waiting, listening, breathing. One afternoon, Carolyn gathered the girls for chores. As she folded sheets with her eldest, she paused, her eyes narrowing. There, across her daughter's arm, was a faint red mark as though something had brushed past, burning lightly against the skin. Her daughter winced when Carolyn touched it. "It hurts," she whispered. Carolyn's stomach dropped. She kissed the girl's forehead, hiding her fear, and whispered, "It's nothing. You're all right." But when she turned, she felt it, the weight of unseen eyes watching from the shadows of the hall. The cellar door shuddered on its hinges. That night, Carolyn told Roger the truth. "It's not just the house creaking," she said, her voice trembling. "It's not just dreams. Something is here. It touched me, Roger. It's leaving marks." Roger frowned, trying to dismiss it, but he saw the fear in her eyes. He saw the bruises himself. And though he said nothing more, he too began to wonder what exactly had they brought their family into. Above them, the farmhouse settled with a long, low groan. And below, in the cellar's dark belly, something stirred. Morning light spilled across the fields, but it did little to ease the unease of the night before. The youngest daughter clung to Carolyn as she made breakfast, her eyes wide and tired, her small voice whispering again and again. "Something pulled my leg. Something was in the room." Roger brushed it off. New house, new dreams. Kids get scared. But Carolyn did not laugh so easily. She remembered the fear in her daughter's voice, the way her tiny body had trembled in her arms. The farmhouse was quiet, too quiet for a place filled with children. And in that stillness, the smallest things began to feel wrong. The clocks were the first sign. One by one, as the morning passed, the Perrons realized that each clock had stopped at the same time, 3 minutes past 3. Not one, not two, every clock. Roger tapped his wristwatch, shook it, but it ticked along just fine. "Power surge," he muttered. "Old wiring. Nothing to worry about." But Carolyn knew the old farmhouse had no electricity in the cellar, and the clocks were wound by hand. What power, then, could have reached into every room to silence them at once? The time itself felt heavy. 3:07. A number etched now into their minds. Outside, Sadie had not moved from the yard. The loyal dog had chosen her place in the grass, head resting flat, eyes fixed on the farmhouse. She would not come to the porch, would not answer the girls' calls. By afternoon, her whines had gone quiet. When one of the girls ran out to check on her, she stopped still in the yard, frozen. The cry that tore from her lips brought the family rushing outside. There, in the grass, lay Sadie, still, her body twisted, her eyes open, as though frozen in terror at something only she had seen. The girls wept, clinging to Carolyn's skirt. Roger carried the dog away, his face grim. No one spoke of it again that day, but silence pressed heavier than words could have. That night, Carolyn lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams above her bed. She traced the bruises already darkening on her arms. Bruises she could not explain. She thought of the clocks. She thought of the dog. The farmhouse seemed to breathe around her, its timbers sighing with the weight of time. In the stillness, she swore she heard it, a faint knock within the walls. Once, then twice, then silence again. She rose, stepping softly across the cold floorboards, moving through the hallways by candlelight. The shadows stretched, swaying with the flame. The air smelled of dust, of damp wood, and something else. Rot, faint, sour, clinging. She followed the sound to the cellar door. The latch trembled in her hand, cold as though touched by frost. But when she opened it, only darkness yawned below, silent and waiting. The next day the girls tried to play, their laughter echoing faintly. But even their games seemed watched. interrupted by the house itself. Toys rolled on their own across the floor. A wooden door creaked shut behind them when no one had touched it. And sometimes when one of the girls whispered, they swore they heard an answer. Not in words, but in a breath, a low sigh, almost human, drifting back. Carolyn scolded them gently, saying it was their imagination. But in her heart, the unease grew sharper. On the second night, the girls gathered in one room, reluctant to sleep alone. The youngest refused to even lie on her bed without her sister holding her hand. The hours crawled by. The farmhouse creaked. The wind pressed against the shutters. Then once more the sound returned. Knock, knock, knock. This time the sound came not from the walls, but from beneath the floor. The girls held their breath, eyes wide, listening to the hollow echo drifting upward. And then, as though mocking them, the sound changed. Clap! 2 sharp claps. The eldest screamed. The candlelight flickered out. And once again, the farmhouse leaned closer, as if savoring their fear. The farmhouse was never truly quiet anymore. Even when the family tried to laugh, to sing, to drown out the unease, the silence underneath remained deep, watchful, patient. That night, the unease became something more. The girls had gone to bed early, huddling together in twos, whispering stories to chase away their fears. Carolyn kissed them one by one, brushing hair from their faces, whispering, "You're safe. Mama's here." But safety was not hers to give. The hours crawled. The lanterns dimmed. The house groaned under the weight of its own history. And then, the sound. At first it was soft, a tug at the sheets, a creak at the end of the bed. The youngest daughter stirred, her tiny voice calling out in the dark, "Stop pulling! Please, stop!" Her sister shifted beside her, confused. "I'm not pulling anything." The tug came again, harder. The sheets slipped, sliding toward the foot of the bed. Both girls screamed, clutching one another, as the blanket was yanked violently to the floor. Carolyn rushed in, lantern light spilling across their terrified faces. She gathered them up, soothing them, searching the room. But there was nothing. No one. Only the shadows quivering against the walls. Down the hall, another daughter stirred. She awoke to whispers, soft, hushed, just beyond her ear. She turned, but her sister slept soundly. Still the whispers came, circling her head like a swarm. Words she could not understand, words that were not kind. Her breath quickened. She pulled the blanket tighter, and then, with sudden clarity, the whispers stopped. From the corner of the room came a sound instead. Clap! 2 sharp claps, slow and mocking. She screamed, her voice carrying through the halls. The family was awake now, lanterns lighting the corridors. Roger searched room by room, his jaw tight, but he found nothing. Only the draft of cold air slipping through the house, carrying with it the faint stench of rot. When he returned, Carolyn sat on the girl's bed, rocking the youngest in her arms. Her face was pale, her eyes wide as though she too had heard the clapping. Roger placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's the wind. The old wood. That's all." But she shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "No, this house is trying to tell us something. And I don't think it wants us here." The night stretched on. The children finally fell into uneasy sleep, but Carolyn remained awake. She sat in her room, lantern glowing faintly, listening. Her body ached. She touched the bruises on her arm, darker now, spreading, tender to the touch. She whispered a prayer, words half forgotten, voice trembling. The prayer did not quiet the house. From the hallway came the sound of footsteps, slow, heavy, each one pressing into the boards with deliberate weight. Carolyn rose, lantern shaking in her hand, stepping into the hall. The footsteps retreated, leading her toward the cellar. She followed, her breath shallow, until she reached the door. The latch trembled beneath her hand, as though something on the other side pressed against it. She pulled back, heart pounding, but the sound stopped. Silence fell again. She turned to retreat and froze. At the end of the hall, in the dim light, she saw it. A figure. A woman standing still, her dress gray and tattered, her head tilted at a grotesque angle. The shadows clung to her like smoke. Carolyn's lantern flickered. The figure vanished. Her scream woke the girls again, and Roger came running. But by the time he reached her, the hall was empty, the silence absolute. That night none of them slept. The house had shown itself. And the Perrons understood at last that they were not alone. Daylight returned, but it did little to lift the weight inside the farmhouse. The Perron girls tried to carry on as children do, finding ways to laugh, to play, to pretend nothing was wrong. But the house had already changed them. Their laughter never lasted long. Their games never felt quite safe. One of their favorites was the clapping game. Simple, harmless. One child would cover her eyes with a cloth and count aloud while the others hid somewhere in the house. When the seeker called, "Clap once," the hidden ones would clap, guiding her toward them. It was a game of trust, of sound and silence. But in this house, sound and silence belonged to something else. That evening, the girls begged their mother to let them play. Carolyn hesitated, but their pleading smiles softened her heart. Perhaps, she thought, they needed the laughter. Perhaps joy could drown out the fear. So she tied the blindfold gently around her eldest eyes and spun her 3 times. "No peeking," she warned with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. The girls scattered, giggling, slipping behind doors and under beds, their footsteps echoing through the halls. The blindfolded seeker stretched her hands forward and whispered, "Clap once." 2 hands clapped from the parlor. She grinned, moving toward the sound. "I'm coming!" The house seemed alive with movement. Doors creaking, boards sighing, voices hushed. She paused, listening. "Clap twice." From upstairs came 2 crisp claps, too loud, too close. She tilted her head, giggling nervously. "I hear you," she said, climbing the stairs with careful steps. The hall stretched before her, silent and waiting. Her hands brushed the walls as she whispered again, "Clap once." And from the room ahead, the closet door creaked open. 2 hands pushed through the dark, pale and thin, and clapped softly. She smiled. "Got you now." Carolyn, watching from the doorway, froze. She had seen it. The hands. They had not belonged to any of her daughters. Her voice caught in her throat. She rushed forward, pulling the blindfold from her daughter's eyes, yanking open the closet door. But inside was nothing. Only shadows, stacked boxes, the smell of old wood. The little girl's smile faltered. "But I heard it, Mama. I heard the clap." Carolyn's hands trembled as she pulled her children close. That night, Carolyn lay awake again, the image of those hands haunting her. Her body ached worse now, fresh bruises blooming across her arms, her chest, her legs. She touched them gently, wincing at the pain, her breath trembling. When she closed her eyes, she saw the woman, the figure in gray. Always at the edge of sight, always watching. The farmhouse groaned, its timbers shifting. A door slammed somewhere in the distance, and then the sound returned. Clap, slow, mocking, from the corner of her bedroom. Carolyn turned sharply, lantern light swinging. But nothing moved. No one stood there. She pressed her hands over her ears, whispering prayers, but the sound came again, closer this time. Clap, as if invisible hands were playing the game with her. Down the hall, the girls stirred in their beds, waking to whispers, to cold air, to shadows lengthening along the walls. One of them cried out as unseen fingers tugged at her hair, pulling sharply until her scalp burned. Another screamed when her blanket was ripped away into the dark. Roger rushed through the hall, lantern in hand, shouting, his face pale. But every room was empty, every corner still. The house had chosen its game, and it was no longer playing fair. By morning, the family was exhausted. The children clung to Carolyn, their eyes heavy with fear. Roger searched for explanations, loose boards, drafts, tricks of the mind, but he could not explain the bruises on his wife's skin. And Carolyn, she was weakening, her voice softer each day, her steps slower, her eyes shadowed with sleeplessness. The house was feeding on her, and she knew it. As night fell once again, Carolyn whispered a truth she had been afraid to say aloud. "This house doesn't just want to frighten us," she told Roger. "It wants us. It wants me." Roger's jaw tightened. "Don't say that." But deep in his chest he knew. The house had chosen its prey, and the clapping game was only the beginning. The farmhouse had played with them long enough. Whispers, bruises, claps in the dark, each one a test, a warning, a taste of what lingered in its walls. But on this night, the house chose to reveal more of itself. The air was heavy from the moment the lanterns dimmed. A storm brewed outside, wind rattling the shutters, rain streaking across the glass. The Perron girls huddled together in one room, their voices hushed. Carolyn lingered in the hall, listening to every creak, every sigh of the timbers, her skin prickling with the certainty that something was near. She brushed her hand against the new bruises forming on her wrist, darker now, like fingerprints pressed deep into her skin. She whispered a prayer, her voice trembling. From the cellar, a sound answered. Knock. Slow, deliberate. She froze, the candle flame trembling in her hand. Another knock followed, louder this time, shaking the latch. Roger came quickly, pulling her away. "It's just the storm," he insisted, though his eyes betrayed doubt. He bolted the cellar door shut and led her back to the bedroom. But the house was not finished. Around midnight, the youngest daughter stirred. She whispered her sister's name, but her sister was already awake, staring wide-eyed at the corner of the room. There, in the flicker of the moonlight, a figure lingered. A woman, tall and gaunt, her dress torn, her face shadowed, her head tilted to the side at an unnatural angle, her hair hanging in dark strands. The child gasped. The figure moved closer. And then the smell. Rotten, sour, suffocating. It filled the room, pressing against their throats, making their stomachs heave. The girls screamed. Roger burst through the door, Carolyn at his side. He pulled the girls into his arms as Carolyn lifted the lantern high. The figure was gone, but the smell remained. And then, the closet door creaked open by itself. Slowly, inch by inch, until the darkness within seemed to swell outward. Carolyn held her breath. From the blackness came two pale hands, clapping once, twice, sharp and cruel. The lantern shattered as it slipped from her hands, plunging them into darkness. Chaos followed. The girls shrieked as unseen forces yanked their hair, pulled at their blankets, shoved them against the walls. Carolyn felt her body seize, an icy grip tightening around her chest, lifting her from the floor for a heartbeat before dropping her heavily. Roger swung blindly into the dark, shouting, but his fists met only air. The smell of decay grew stronger, filling every corner, every breath. And then, silence. The attacks stopped as suddenly as they began. The house groaned, the timbers settling, as though satisfied. They sat together on the floor, trembling, gasping, lanterns broken, the storm still raging outside. The girls clung to Carolyn, their tears soaking her dress. Roger's face was pale, his body trembling with rage he could not direct at anything he could see. Carolyn whispered into the silence, "It's not just haunting us, it's trying to take us." Roger did not argue. Not this time. The farmhouse had spoken, and though the family tried to hold each other close, to push back the terror with whispered prayers and weak smiles, deep inside they knew the truth. They could not face this alone. Far away on that same stormy night, two others stirred in their sleep. Ed and Lorraine Warren, names already tied to shadows, to haunted relics, to cries for help whispered in desperation. Lorraine sat upright suddenly, her breath catching, her hand clutching her chest. She had seen something. A flash of a house, a woman's face twisted by rope, children crying in the dark. Ed touched her shoulder, concern in his eyes. Another one. Lorraine nodded slowly. Yes, another family. The farmhouse had awoken, and the Warrens were already being drawn into its shadow. The morning after the storm was gray and heavy. Mist clung to the fields, curling around the farmhouse like a shroud. Inside, the Perrons sat quietly around the breakfast table. The girls poked at their food, their eyes hollow from lack of sleep. Roger forced a smile, urging them to eat. Carolyn sat silently, her sleeves tugged low over her wrists. When she reached for her cup, the sleeve slipped. The girls gasped. Roger froze. The skin of her arm was mottled with fresh bruises. Dark circles, round and uneven, as though gripped by unseen hands. Some were old, fading yellow. Others were new, deep purple, raw and angry. Carolyn, Roger whispered, his voice breaking. I don't know how they got there, she said softly. I don't remember. But in her heart she knew. The house had touched her. The girls whispered as they cleared their plates. One leaned into the other, saying she had seen something hovering above their mother in the night. A woman's shape, crouched low, whispering words that made no sense. Carolyn heard them and turned sharply. Don't talk about it, she snapped, her voice harsher than she intended. The girls fell silent, wide-eyed. Carolyn sighed, pulling them close. I'm sorry, I don't want it to hurt you. Her words did not soothe them. They had seen the same figure, again and again, lingering in the corners, waiting in the shadows. And now it seemed to follow their mother most of all. The farmhouse did not rest in daylight. That afternoon, Carolyn went about her chores, folding sheets in the parlor. As she worked, the air shifted. The smell came first sharp, rotting, clinging to her lungs. Then the sound, a faint scratching from the ceiling above. She froze, listening. The scratching grew louder, skittering across the boards. She moved toward the stairs, her heart racing, but before she reached them, the picture frames along the wall fell all at once, shattering glass across the floor. Carolyn cried out, clutching her chest. The air grew colder. A shadow darted past the stairwell, and then silence again. When Roger returned, he found her trembling in the kitchen, shards still scattered across the floor. She begged him to believe her. He only nodded, his face pale, but his silence spoke louder than words. That night, the youngest daughter woke once more. She did not scream this time. She only stared, eyes wide, at the figure crouched by her bed. The woman in gray. Her head twisted, her mouth whispering words the child could not understand. The girl pulled the blanket over her head, trembling, too afraid to move, too afraid even to breathe. The whispering grew louder. The mattress sank beside her as if someone had sat down. And then a hand, cold and heavy, pressed against her back. She wailed, her scream carrying down the hall. By the time Carolyn and Roger rushed in, the figure was gone, but the girl's back bore red marks, as though fingers had dug into her skin. Carolyn wept that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, clutching her rosary, whispering prayers into the silence. But even as the words left her lips, she felt the house pressing in, listening, mocking. Her reflection in the mirror caught her eye. For a moment, it wasn't her face staring back. It was hollow, gaunt, eyes black with hate. She gasped, stumbling back. The image blinked and was gone. Roger held her, but his comfort felt empty. He could not fight what he could not see. Far from the farmhouse in another town, Ed and Lorraine Warren prepared for the day. Lorraine sipped her tea, her gaze distant, troubled. She had dreamed again, a house wrapped in mist, a woman's laughter echoing through its halls, children screaming in the dark. Ed touched her hand. Another vision? She nodded slowly. Something's happening, and it won't stop until we find them. Back in Rhode Island, the farmhouse groaned as night fell once more. The cellar door rattled. The walls seemed to whisper. Carolyn lay in bed, bruises blooming fresh across her skin, tears streaking her face. And the children, though exhausted, dared not sleep. Because now they knew the truth. The house was no longer only haunting them. It was claiming them. The days blurred into one another. Every sunrise seemed weaker than the last. Every night stretched longer and darker. The farmhouse had ceased to be a home. It had become a trap, its walls tightening around the family like a snare. Carolyn felt it most of all. Each morning she woke with fresh bruises. Each evening she grew weaker, her skin pale, her eyes sunken, her voice faint. Roger tried to hide his fear, but even the girls whispered of it now. They said the house had chosen their mother. One afternoon, Carolyn gathered the laundry from the line. The wind was low, the sky soft with drifting clouds. For a moment, she felt almost peaceful. She folded a sheet into her arms, pressed it to her face, breathed in the sun-warmed fabric. Then the air shifted. A chill cut through the field. The wind stilled. Carolyn frowned, lowering the sheet. And there, at the end of the line, the fabric billowed not with wind but as if something inside it moved. The shape of a body pressed against the sheet, arms stretching outward, a head tilting unnaturally. Carolyn gasped, stumbling back. The sheet tore free, whipping through the air, and for an instant, it caught against a figure standing in the yard. A woman, tall and gray, her face hidden, her head bent. Then the sheet fluttered empty to the ground. The figure was gone. Carolyn's scream carried into the house. That night, the girls begged to sleep in their parents' room. Roger agreed, but the farmhouse did not care for walls or locked doors. As the storm rolled in, the knocking began again. From the walls, from the ceiling, from the cellar below. The youngest clung to Carolyn, whispering, "Don't let her take me." Carolyn hushed her, stroking her hair, but her own body trembled, her lips moving in silent prayer. At 3:07 a.m., the lantern blew out. The room plunged into darkness. And then, the clapping. Slow, deliberate, from inside the wardrobe. Roger lunged forward, yanking the doors open. Empty. Only the smell of rot, thick and suffocating. Behind him, Carolyn convulsed. She fell to the floor, her body arching, her mouth opening in a scream that was not her own. Her voice deepened, breaking, echoing with rage. The girls shrieked. Roger dropped to his knees, holding his wife's shoulders, shouting her name. After a moment, the fit passed. Carolyn collapsed into his arms, gasping for air, her face streaked with tears. The farmhouse had made its choice. Far away, Lorraine Warren woke with a start. She clutched her chest, gasping as though she herself had been dragged into Carolyn's torment. Ed rushed to her side. "What is it? What did you see?" Her eyes brimmed with tears. "A woman. She's being drained. Something wants her soul." Ed held her hand firmly. "Then we have to find her." Back at the farmhouse, Roger sat awake in the dark, Carolyn trembling in his arms. The girls piled around them. He stared at the cellar door, listening to the slow, steady knocks rising from beneath the floorboards. For the first time, he admitted the truth aloud. "We can't fight this alone." And somewhere in the silence, the house seemed to laugh. The farmhouse was quiet when the Warrens arrived. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that settles like fog, heavy and unnatural, as though the house itself were holding its breath. It was late afternoon. The sky was a dull, pale gray, the fields empty, the trees leaning in the wind. Ed Warren pulled the car into the long gravel drive. Lorraine sat beside him, her hands folded, her eyes fixed on the house. She had seen it already in visions, in dreams. And now, standing before it, her breath caught in her throat. "This is the place," she whispered. Roger stepped out onto the porch, relief etched across his weary face. He shook Ed's hand firmly, almost desperately. Carolyn appeared behind him, her skin pale, her body frail. She managed a weak smile as she greeted Lorraine, but her eyes were haunted, her wrists covered with long sleeves despite the heat. The girls peered from behind their parents, wide-eyed, clutching each other's hands. "Thank you for coming," Roger said quietly. "We didn't know who else to turn to." "You did the right thing," Ed replied. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The moment Lorraine stepped inside, the air shifted. The farmhouse seemed to recognize her. Shadows lengthened. The temperature dropped. She paused at the threshold, her gaze sweeping the walls, the ceiling, the crooked beams. Her fingers brushed the rosary at her neck. "It knows we're here," she whispered. Ed set down his case cameras, tape recorders, holy water, relics, his tools of defense against the unseen. He moved through the room slowly, methodically, taking note of every detail. But Lorraine did not need tools. She needed only to open herself to the silence. And in that silence, she felt it, a weight pressing against her chest, a voice whispering from nowhere and everywhere at once. "She is mine," Lorraine gasped, clutching her throat. Carolyn rushed to her side. "What is it?" Lorraine looked at her, her eyes wide. "It's here, and it wants you." That evening, the Warrens gathered the family in the parlor. The girls huddled together, Roger standing protectively over them, Carolyn pale and trembling in her chair. Ed spoke calmly, his voice steady. "We believe what you're experiencing is real. We've seen this before. And I'll be honest, what's here isn't just a restless spirit. It's darker, older. It means harm." Lorraine nodded. "It's latched on to Carolyn. It's draining her. If we don't act, it will consume her completely." Carolyn's eyes brimmed with tears. "What do we do?" Ed exchanged a glance with Lorraine. "First, we need proof. Enough for the church to authorize an exorcism. That means we stay, we watch, we document everything." That night, the Warrens did not leave. They moved quietly through the farmhouse, setting cameras, recorders, placing crosses in doorways. The children watched them with wide eyes, a flicker of hope softening their fear. But the house was not still. At 3:07 a.m., the activity began. The cameras clicked on their own. Doors slammed in unison. A chill swept through the parlor, extinguishing the candles. And then, the clapping. From the cellar, from the halls, from the bedrooms where the children huddled. One by one, the sounds filled the house until it seemed as though dozens of unseen hands were applauding in the dark. The youngest girl cried out, pointing to the stairs. "She's here!" Lorraine turned and saw her. A woman in gray, her neck twisted by the rope that had ended her life, her eyes black pits of hate. She stood on the landing, watching, her mouth curling into a smile that was not human. Lorraine's voice shook. "Bathsheba." The farmhouse erupted. Objects flew across rooms, furniture overturned. Carolyn was flung from her chair, her body convulsing as though pulled by invisible strings. The girls screamed, clinging to their father. Ed rushed forward, pressing the crucifix to Carolyn's forehead, shouting prayers into the chaos. Lorraine dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face, whispering for strength. And then silence. Bathsheba vanished. Carolyn slumped to the floor, trembling, her skin slick with sweat. The house groaned one final time, as though laughing, and then went still. The Warrens exchanged a grim glance. They had their proof. But they also had their enemy. Bathsheba had revealed herself, and she would not let Carolyn go without a fight. The farmhouse looked calmer in daylight. Sunlight streamed across its faded wallpaper, catching dust motes that drifted lazily in the air. The girls played quietly on the porch, their laughter soft, their eyes always glancing back to the house. But the silence inside was thick. It was the silence of something waiting. The Warrens set about their work. Ed checked the cameras, rewinding the reels from the night before. The static crackled, frames blurred with streaks of shadow. Then faintly, a sound. Clapping. Clear as day, echoing through the static. Lorraine sat across from Carolyn, studying her carefully. The bruises had spread, dark patches along her arms and neck. She looked thinner, drained, her hands trembling as she lifted a teacup. "You've grown weaker since I saw you last night," Lorraine said softly. Carolyn's eyes dropped. "She comes in my dreams. She whispers things, terrible things. Sometimes I wake up standing in the cellar, and I don't know how I got there." Lorraine reached for her hand. It was cold. Too cold. "She's trying to take you," Lorraine whispered. Later that day, Lorraine walked the property. Her clairvoyant senses reached into the bones of the land, into the timbers of the house. Visions flooded her mind. She saw fields long ago, a woman standing beneath a tree with rope coiled in her hands. She saw infants, fragile and crying, their voices swallowed by the wind. She saw fire, sickness, blood. The name came to her again, hissing like venom. Bathsheba. Lorraine stumbled back, clutching her chest. The images burned behind her eyes. That evening, the Warrens pored over old records at the kitchen table. Faded documents, newspaper clippings, genealogies. Roger watched nervously, his hands restless on the tabletop. Ed tapped a name on the paper. Bathsheba Sherman. Lived here in the 1800s. Neighbors accused her of witchcraft. They said she sacrificed her infant child to the devil, then hanged herself in the yard. Carolyn shuddered. "That's who I've seen. That's the woman." Lorraine nodded grimly. "She bound herself to this land in death, and now she wants to bind you to her in life." Roger's fists clenched. "So how do we stop her?" Ed hesitated. "We'll need more evidence. Enough to bring to the church. Enough to justify an exorcism." Carolyn's voice cracked. "I don't know how much longer I can last." That night, as the house grew dark, the attacks returned. The girls shrieked when their toys moved on their own. A ball rolled across the floor, bouncing to a stop at Carolyn's feet. She bent to pick it up, and a shadow darted behind her, tall and crooked. The piano struck a single note by itself, then another, echoing through the hall. Lorraine froze in the doorway, her breath catching. She saw Bathsheba crouched on the piano bench, her twisted neck snapping as her head turned toward her. "Get out," the voice hissed. The lanterns shattered. The room plunged into darkness. Carolyn screamed as invisible hands seized her hair, yanking her backward. She was dragged across the floor, her nails clawing the wood, leaving splintered grooves. Roger lunged to grab her, Ed shoving the crucifix forward, shouting prayers. The girls cried out, clinging to one another as the house erupted in chaos. Doors slamming, windows rattling, furniture overturning. Lorraine dropped to her knees, whispering urgently, "Carolyn, fight her! She wants your soul, but she cannot take it unless you give in." Carolyn convulsed, her body writhing as though another force moved within her. Her eyes rolled back, her voice breaking into guttural tones not her own. Ed forced the crucifix against her skin. Carolyn screamed, thrashing, until suddenly the pressure released. She collapsed to the floor, gasping, sweat streaking her face. The house fell still. Later, as Carolyn slept fitfully, Lorraine sat with Ed by the fire. Her voice was low, trembling. "She's stronger than we thought, stronger than anything I've felt before. If we wait too long, we may lose her." Ed nodded grimly. "Then we'll go to the church tomorrow." Lorraine looked back toward the cellar door, shadows curling beneath it like smoke. "Tomorrow may be too late." The farmhouse no longer tried to hide its malice. Each day its presence grew stronger, bolder, and each night the silence stretched too long until it broke with violence. The girls no longer played freely. They huddled together in rooms with lanterns burning low, whispering prayers they half remembered. Roger stayed close, his jaw tight, his eyes darting to every shadow. And Carolyn was fading. Her bruises darkened with each sunrise, spreading like ink beneath her skin. Her voice wavered when she spoke. Sometimes her lips moved with whispers she did not remember saying. At times she would drift into silence, staring at a corner of the room as if something there held her in its grip. The Warrens documented everything. Ed carried the heavy recorder from room to room, placing it on tables, shelves, mantels. He wound the reels, listened to the static, captured the knocks, the whispers, the faint echoes of laughter that drifted from nowhere. Lorraine walked the halls with her rosary, her eyes searching corners no one else could see. Shadows brushed against her vision. She caught glimpses of faces, hollow-eyed, twisted with grief, figures of the past who lingered still. And always, always she felt Bathsheba watching. Waiting at every family who lived here before, Lorraine whispered to Ed one night. They all felt her. They all left, or they were broken. She won't stop until this family is hers. The farmhouse made its move again at 3:07 a.m. The girls stirred awake to the sound of laughter, high, cruel, echoing through the walls. Toys scattered across the floor began to roll on their own, bouncing off one another with sharp clicks. A dresser shifted, scraping loudly across the floorboards. The girls screamed, clinging to their father as he burst in. Then came the clapping. From the closet, from under the bed, from the ceiling above. Clap! 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 Roger swung open the wardrobe doors, shouting into the dark. Empty, but the smell poured out, rancid, choking, filling the room. Carolyn staggered forward, clutching her chest, her body convulsed. She fell to her knees, gasping, her eyes rolling back. Lorraine caught her, whispering urgently, "Fight her, Carolyn! Don't let her in!" But Carolyn's mouth twisted into a grin that wasn't hers. A guttural laugh spilled from her throat. "She is mine," the voice hissed. "You cannot save her." Ed rushed forward, pressing the crucifix to Carolyn's forehead. Steam rose, the smell of burning flesh filling the room. Carolyn screamed her own voice this time, thrashing against his grip. Lorraine clutched her rosary tighter, whispering prayers through tears. She saw Bathsheba behind Carolyn, her form towering, her face stretched and grotesque, her black eyes boring into hers. And in that moment, Lorraine understood. Bathsheba was not only possessing Carolyn, she was feeding from the fear of everyone in the house. Each cry, each tear, each desperate prayer only made her stronger. When the struggle subsided, Carolyn collapsed, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Roger lifted her, tears streaking his face, carrying her to bed as the girls sobbed. Lorraine touched Ed's arm, her voice shaking. "If we wait for the church, we'll lose her. Bathsheba won't let go willingly." Ed's jaw tightened. "Then we'll perform the rite ourselves." The farmhouse groaned as though it had heard them, its timbers shuddering, its windows rattling. Outside, thunder rolled across the fields. The storm was gathering, and Bathsheba was ready. The farmhouse was restless. All night it creaked and groaned, as though its beams strained beneath a weight unseen. Shadows shifted along the walls, too slow and deliberate to be tricks of lantern light. Carolyn lay in bed, her breath shallow, her skin clammy with sweat. She whispered in her sleep, her lips forming words no one recognized. At times she cried out in a guttural voice that made the girls cover their ears. Roger sat beside her, exhausted, his hand clasping hers. But when she stirred, her grip tightened with unnatural strength, her nails digging into his skin until he winced. Her eyes opened once, and for an instant, they were not hers. At dawn, Lorraine stepped into the yard. Mist curled low over the ground, the air damp and cold. She turned her gaze to the great tree near the farmhouse, its branches bent like arms reaching for the earth. Her vision clouded, her chest tightening. She saw it. Bathsheba. The rope around her neck. The moment she cursed the land with her last breath. Lorraine gasped, clutching her rosary. The vision faded, but the weight of it lingered. She whispered to Ed when she returned inside. "She's bound herself here. This land is hers. She won't release it. She won't release Carolyn." Ed's expression hardened. "Then we'll have to tear her out." That evening, the farmhouse stirred with new life. The girls sat together in the parlor, their small voices singing softly to drown the silence. Roger tended the fire, his shoulders heavy. Carolyn sat nearby, her gaze unfocused, her lips moving silently. Suddenly the room grew cold. The fire sputtered and died. The girls fell silent. Roger looked up sharply. Carolyn's head turned slowly toward the cellar door. Her body stiffened, her eyes wide and unblinking. And then, before anyone could stop her, she rose. She moved quickly, her footsteps unnaturally heavy, her lips twisting into a grin that was not her own. Roger called her name, but she did not answer. She walked straight to the cellar door, pulled the latch, and disappeared into the darkness below. "Carolyn!" Roger shouted, rushing after her. Ed followed, lantern in hand, the girls crying out from behind. Lorraine's chest seized with dread. She had seen this before, in her visions. They descended into the cellar. The air was colder than ever, thick with the stench of rot. Shadows clung to the walls, stretching unnaturally as the lantern flickered. At the far end of the cellar, Carolyn stood, her back to them, her body trembling, her hands pressed against the stone wall, as if she were carving words into it with invisible fingers. "Carolyn," Ed called gently, "come back upstairs." Her head turned slowly, her eyes glistened black. Her voice, layered and guttural, hissed, "You can't have her. She is mine." The lantern sputtered and nearly went out. A loud crack split the air as a chair toppled violently across the room. The cellar door above them slammed shut with a deafening bang. Carolyn shrieked, her body convulsing. She fell to the ground, clawing at the earth, her nails tearing against stone. Lorraine rushed forward trying to hold her, whispering prayers. But Carolyn thrashed with unnatural strength, throwing her aside. Roger cried out, desperate, but Ed caught his arm. "If you touch her now, you'll only make it worse." Carolyn writhed, her screams echoing against the walls, splitting into two voices, hers and another beneath it, deeper, older, dripping with venom. Lorraine pressed her rosary to Carolyn's chest, tears streaking her face. "She's fading, Ed. Bathsheba's almost taken her." Ed's jaw tightened. His voice was grim. "We can't wait for the church anymore." The cellar groaned as though the house itself agreed. Shadows writhed like smoke, curling around Carolyn's body. The air thickened until every breath was a struggle. And above the chaos, Bathsheba's laughter filled the dark. They carried Carolyn upstairs, her body limp, her breath shallow. The girls sobbed, clinging to Lorraine, begging her to save their mother. Roger's face was pale, his hands trembling as he touched Carolyn's cold skin. Ed set the crucifix on the table, his Bible beside it. His voice shook, but his resolve was clear. "We begin the rite tonight." Lorraine nodded, her eyes still fixed on Carolyn. "If we wait another day, she'll be gone." The farmhouse settled into silence as though listening. But beneath the silence came a sound soft, deliberate, echoing from the cellar below. Clap, clap, and then a whisper that curled through the halls. "She is mine." The farmhouse was not quiet anymore. It groaned with every step, rattled with every draft, sighed with every breath the family dared to take. It had stopped pretending to be still. Now it showed its teeth. Carolyn lay in bed, her skin as pale as the sheets around her. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, her lips murmuring words she did not seem to hear. At times her eyes opened and the family flinched. For sometimes they were hers, and sometimes they were not. The Warrens gathered in the parlor with Roger. The girls slept fitfully upstairs, huddled together like sparrows in a storm. Ed placed the Bible on the table, its worn cover catching the lantern light. Beside it lay the crucifix, a vial of holy water, and the recorder still buzzing faintly with static. Roger's hands shook as he lit a lantern. "You said the church won't send a priest yet. How long are we supposed to wait?" Ed's jaw tightened. "We can't. Not anymore. If Bathsheba takes Carolyn completely—" He stopped, his voice breaking. "Then she may never come back," Lorraine whispered, her eyes distant. "She's already halfway gone. If we don't act tonight, we lose her. Roger's fist clenched. He looked toward the stairs, where his daughter slept, and then to his wife, trembling in their bed. He nodded. Then we do it tonight. The hours stretched thin. Lorraine moved through the rooms, sprinkling holy water in corners, whispering prayers that trembled on her lips. The farmhouse creaked in answer, its beams moaning like voices in the dark. Ed prepared the cellar, for it was there, he said, where Bathsheba's grip was strongest. He set candles along the walls, their flames flickering against stone. He placed the crucifix on a wooden chair, the Bible open before it. The air grew colder as he worked. His breath fogged, the shadows lengthened. When he glanced over his shoulder, for just a heartbeat, he thought he saw her Bathsheba, standing at the edge of the candlelight, her neck bent, her grin wide, and then she was gone. The family gathered in the kitchen before the rite. The girls clung to their father, their voices shaking with fear. Lorraine bent to their level, her hands soft on their shoulders. "Listen to me," she whispered. "No matter what happens, stay together, stay strong, and remember your love for your mother is stronger than Bathsheba's hate." The girls nodded through tears. Carolyn stirred in the other room, a low groan escaping her lips. The sound was not her own. The house shuddered with it, as though echoing her pain. Roger rose, his face pale. "It's starting." They carried Carolyn down to the cellar. Her body convulsed as they lowered her into the chair. Her wrists were bound, her head lolling, her breath ragged. The smell of rot filled the air, stronger than ever, clinging to the stone. Lorraine clutched her rosary. Ed opened the Bible, his hands trembling but firm. The cellar door slammed shut above them. The lanterns flickered. Shadows crawled along the walls like living things. The house had been waiting for this. Ed raised the crucifix high, his voice steady. "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." Carolyn's eyes snapped open, black, bottomless, unblinking. She let out a scream that rattled the cellar walls, a scream that was not hers. The rite had begun. The cellar shuddered as Ed's words filled the air. "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." Carolyn's body jerked against the chair, her arms straining against the ropes. Her head snapped back, her mouth opening wide. The sound that poured from her was not a scream, but a howl guttural, layered, a chorus of voices that seemed to rise from the stones themselves. The lantern flames bent sideways as though blown by invisible breath. Dust rained from the beams. The farmhouse was awake, and it was angry. Ed pressed the crucifix to Carolyn's forehead. She convulsed violently, her eyes rolling white, foam gathering at her lips. The smell of burning filled the cellar, thick and choking. "Leave her," Ed commanded, his voice trembling but firm. "You have no claim here." Carolyn laughed. The sound was jagged, broken, spilling from her throat in tones too deep for a human voice. Her head turned slowly, unnaturally far, until her black eyes fixed on Lorraine. "She will die," the voice hissed. "Her children will follow. This house belongs to me." Lorraine staggered, clutching her rosary tighter. Her vision blurred. She saw flashes: Bathsheba under the tree, the rope around her neck, the curse that spilled from her lips. She saw infants crying, their voices silenced. And she saw Carolyn's face twisted, hollow, devoured. "Fight her, Carolyn," Lorraine pleaded through tears. "Think of your children. Don't let her take you." For a moment, Carolyn's eyes flickered, her own voice breaking through in a sob. "Help me." Then Bathsheba's snarl drowned it out. Carolyn's body lifted from the chair, ropes snapping taut, her limbs thrashing. The crucifix in Ed's hands seared hotter, the wood smoking. The girls screamed upstairs, their cries echoing faintly through the floor. Roger tried to rush toward the stairs, but the cellar door above slammed shut with a deafening crash. The entire house groaned as though locking them in. "Stay with me," Ed shouted, his voice rising over the chaos. He read louder, his words rattling the stones. I command you, leave this woman, in the name of the Lord! Carolyn shrieked, her chair flipping violently onto its side. She hit the ground with bone-jarring force, but the voice that escaped her was triumphant. You cannot save her. She is mine. Suddenly the lanterns burst, glass shattered, plunging the cellar into near darkness. Only the faint glow of candles remained, their flames whipping wildly. From the walls came movement. Shadows stretched, writhed, twisting into grotesque shapes. Figures of long-dead victims seemed to crawl from the corners, hollow eyes, broken mouths, their arms reaching, whispering for release. The girls upstairs pounded on the cellar door, their voices crying for their mother. Lorraine looked up, her face stricken. They can feel it too, Carolyn thrashed, her hands clawing at her own skin, her nails raked across her arms, drawing blood. Roger cried out, rushing forward, but Ed blocked him. She'll kill herself if we don't stop this, Roger shouted. She's not in control, Ed answered. His voice broke for a moment, but he pressed on, forcing the crucifix against her chest. Carolyn's back arched, her scream tearing through the cellar like a storm. Lorraine fell to her knees, pressing her rosary against Carolyn's hands. Carolyn, listen to me. Hear your daughters. Their love is stronger than Bathsheba's hate. Hold on to them. For a heartbeat, the blackness in Carolyn's eyes flickered. Tears welled in the corners. Roger, she whispered, her own voice faint. Then Bathsheba roared, shaking the house so violently the beams cracked above them. Because the exorcism had only begun, and Bathsheba would not release her prize without war. The cellar shook as though the earth itself were trying to split open. Carolyn writhed on the ground, her body moving with impossible strength. Her voice rose in shrieks and guttural laughter, echoing from the stone walls until it seemed the entire house was speaking through her. Lorraine clutched her rosary, her lips moving in desperate prayer, but her vision clouded again, and the spirit dragged her into another flood of images. She saw herself beneath the old tree, the rope swinging in the wind. She saw her reflection in the farmhouse window, but when it turned, it was not her face, but Bathsheba's. The black eyes stared into hers, and the voice whispered, I will take her, and then I will take you. Lorraine screamed, stumbling backward. Ed rushed to her side, steadying her, but Bathsheba's rage was already upon them. The crucifix in his hand grew scalding. Burning his palm, he dropped it with a hiss, the wood clattering against the stones. At once, a violent wind rushed through the cellar, extinguishing half the candles, plunging the room into trembling shadows. From those shadows, hands reached long, skeletal, grasping at Ed's shoulders, clawing his arms. He staggered, shouting the prayer louder. The power of Christ compels you. The hands retreated, vanishing into the black, but laughter filled the air, sharp and mocking. Roger tried to push forward, desperate to hold Carolyn, but an unseen force hurled him backward. He slammed into the cellar wall, gasping for air. His daughters cried out from above, pounding on the locked cellar door. Their voices carried through the boards. Mama! Please, Mama! Carolyn's head snapped toward the sound, her face twisting. For an instant, her own eyes blinked through the black, wide with pain, filled with tears. But Bathsheba wrenched her back, snarling from her lips. They will die with her. Lorraine pressed forward on her knees, ignoring the burning in her chest. Carolyn, listen. It's me, Lorraine. You're stronger than she is. Think of your children. Hold on to them. Bathsheba roared, a sound that rattled the beams and cracked the stone. Lorraine's rosary snapped, beads scattering across the floor. Suddenly, an unseen force seized her throat, lifting her off her knees. She clawed at her neck, gasping, her face turning pale as the invisible grip tightened. Ed shouted her name, leaping to pull her back. The grip released, she collapsed into his arms, coughing violently, her eyes wide with terror. She's trying to kill me, Lorraine gasped, her voice hoarse. Ed held her close, whispering fiercely. She won't, not while I breathe. Carolyn convulsed again, her body slamming against the cellar floor. Blood trickled from her mouth, her nails tearing grooves into the wood. Her eyes rolled black once more, and Bathsheba's voice poured out, filled with venom. She belongs to me. Leave this house or watch her soul burn. The candles blew out. Darkness swallowed them whole. For a long moment, there was only the sound of Carolyn's ragged breathing. And then a soft, deliberate clap echoed from the corner of the cellar. Clap, clap. The Warrens froze. Another clap followed, this time behind them. The darkness was alive, moving, circling them like a predator. Lorraine forced herself to rise again, trembling but unbroken. She pressed her trembling hand against Carolyn's forehead, whispering through tears, "You are not hers. You are a mother, a wife, a child of God. Hold on, Carolyn. Just hold on." For a flicker of a second, Carolyn's body stilled. Her lips parted, and in her own faint, broken voice, she whispered one word. "Roger." Roger staggered forward, his eyes wet, his voice cracking. "I'm here, Carolyn. I'm right here." Her face twisted in agony, torn between two forces: her love for her family and Bathsheba's unyielding hatred. And the battle for her soul raged on. The cellar shook violently, dirt spilling from the ceiling beams. A mirror shattered. The crucifix clattered across the floor as though kicked by unseen feet. Ed's voice thundered once more, rising above the storm. "In the name of Christ, I command you, leave her." Bathsheba's scream filled the air, rattling the very bones of the house. And yet Carolyn still lived. The fight was far from over. The cellar felt smaller now, its walls closing in with every heartbeat. The air was so thick with rot that each breath came like swallowing poison. The candles guttered and spat, their flames clawing at the shadows. But the darkness seemed to swell stronger, pressing against the light. Carolyn lay sprawled on the cellar floor, her body twisted at odd angles, her skin pale, slick with sweat. Her eyes opened, black and endless. Her lips stretched into a grin far too wide, a grin that was not hers. Bathsheba was not hiding anymore. Ed's voice rang out, firm though hoarse. "The power of Christ compels you!" Carolyn's body lifted violently from the ground. Her head snapped back, her arms straining against the ropes that bound her wrists. A scream erupted from her throat, so sharp, so layered, that the glass jars lining the cellar shelves shattered at once. Roger shielded his face from the flying shards, shouting his wife's name. The girls above pounded on the locked cellar door, their cries muffled but desperate. Lorraine staggered forward, clutching her rosary tighter, though her hands bled from broken beads. Her voice trembled, but did not falter. "Bathsheba, you will not win. You cannot destroy love. Carolyn is stronger than you." Bathsheba's laugh poured from Carolyn's throat, jagged, mocking, shaking the walls. "Stronger? She is mine. Her soul cries for me, and her body will feed me." Suddenly, Carolyn's body surged upward, her bonds snapping. She slammed against the ceiling beams with a crack, hanging there for a moment like a puppet on strings. Her hair dangled downward, her eyes black pits staring at them. Lorraine gasped, reaching for her. Roger fell to his knees, sobbing, shouting her name. Ed roared, forcing the crucifix upward. "In the name of Christ, I command you, release her!" The cellar erupted. The shelves hurled across the room, chairs toppled. The lantern burst, plunging them into a chaos of shadows and fire. The house groaned as though alive, its timbers screaming under the weight of rage. Carolyn crashed back to the ground, her body convulsing. She clawed at her own face, tearing at her skin, screaming with two voices at once. Roger rushed forward, but an unseen force flung him across the room, his body striking the stone wall. He gasped for air, crumpled, but still trying to crawl back to her. Lorraine caught Carolyn's wrists, her tears dripping into the woman's skin. "Carolyn, it's Lorraine. Hear me, you are not alone. Think of your daughters. They need you. They love you. Don't let her steal that from you." For a heartbeat, Carolyn's eyes flickered. Her mouth trembled. A whisper escaped faint, broken. My girls! But Bathsheba roared, slamming Carolyn's body against the wall with crushing force. Ed pressed on, his voice louder, fierce, echoing against the storm of chaos. The power of Christ compels you. The power of Christ compels you. The crucifix burned white in his hand, the light spilling across the cellar. The shadows shrieked, retreating into the corners, writhing against the glow. Bathsheba screamed through Carolyn, her voice layered and venomous. You cannot take her. She belongs to me. Her soul is mine. The farmhouse shuddered, dust raining down. The beams cracked as though the house itself would tear apart before letting her go. Carolyn's face twisted in agony. For one terrible moment, she reached toward Roger and the girls, her voice fractured. Run! Please! Run! Lorraine shook her head fiercely. No, fight her, Carolyn. You're stronger than she is. Hold on to your children. Hold on to their love. The cellar swirled with shadows, the air alive with Bathsheba's rage. Objects flew wildly, slamming into the walls. The table splintered. Stones cracked. And in the midst of it, Carolyn screamed once more, a scream that was hers, raw and human, piercing through Bathsheba's voice. For the first time, Bathsheba faltered. Lorraine saw the weakness, the small crack in the darkness. She pressed her rosary to Carolyn's hand and whispered, steady and firm, love is stronger than hate, and you are not hers to claim. Ed raised the crucifix higher, his voice shaking but unyielding. By the blood of Christ, I cast you out, Bathsheba shrieked, the sound rattling the stone walls, so loud it seemed to tear the night apart. Carolyn's body convulsed one final time, then went still. The cellar fell into silence. The candles flickered weakly. Dust settled in the heavy air. Carolyn lay motionless, her skin pale, her chest rising shallowly. Roger crawled to her side, sobbing, gathering her into his arms. Lorraine pressed trembling fingers to her wrist and felt a pulse. She's alive, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. But her face was pale, her eyes haunted. Because she knew the truth. Bathsheba was not gone. Not yet. The cellar was heavy with silence. For a moment, it seemed the storm had passed. Carolyn lay limp in Roger's arms, her breath shallow, her lips pale. The girls cried above the cellar door, their small fists pounding faintly against the wood. But Lorraine's eyes stayed fixed on the shadows. She knew silence in this house was never peace. It was only waiting. Ed set the crucifix down gently, his chest heaving. His palm was blistered, red where the wood had burned him. He wiped sweat from his brow and knelt beside Carolyn, whispering prayers under his breath. Roger stroked his wife's hair, whispering her name. It's over. You're safe now. But Carolyn's eyelids fluttered. Slowly her lips curled into a smile. Not hers. Too wide. Too sharp. Her eyes opened. Black. Bathsheba had never left. Carolyn's body convulsed violently, knocking Roger backward. She rose to her knees with unnatural speed, her hands clawing at the stones, her mouth stretching wide with a guttural roar. Lorraine gasped, clutching her rosary tighter. She's still inside her. She's holding on. The cellar erupted. The shelves toppled. Tools flew from the walls. The crucifix hurled across the room, striking stone and splintering. The candles snuffed out in unison, leaving only the faint glow of the storm seeping through the cracks. And then, the sound again. Clap, 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 from the darkness around them. Roger scrambled toward Carolyn, trying to hold her, but she thrashed with inhuman strength. Her nails raked his arm, drawing blood. She hissed, her voice layered, venomous. You can't save her. She is mine. She has given herself to me. Carolyn's face twisted in agony. For an instant, her own voice broke through. Help me, please. Lorraine dropped to her knees, tears streaking her face. Hold on, Carolyn. Think of your daughters, their laughter, their faces. They need you. Don't let her take you from them. Bathsheba snarled, using Carolyn's lips to spit the words. They are mine too. Suddenly, Carolyn surged upward, breaking free of Roger's grip. She sprinted with terrifying speed toward the cellar stairs. The door above burst open with a crash, the girls screaming as they stumbled back. No! Lorraine cried, rushing after her. Carolyn's body slammed against the kitchen wall, her head snapping violently, her hands clawing at her own throat. The girls sobbed, clinging to each other, as their mother's voice turned into a low growl. Ed raised the Bible high, his voice thundering. By the authority of Christ, I command you, leave her! The farmhouse itself seemed to revolt. The walls cracked, windows shattered upstairs. A violent wind roared through the halls, rattling every board. The air was thick with shadows, writhing, reaching, circling like vultures. Carolyn shrieked, her body lifting once more, her limbs flailing. Roger begged, tears streaming down his face. Please, don't take her. Take me instead. For a heartbeat, Carolyn's face softened. Her eyes flickered, her own gaze breaking through. She whispered his name. Then Bathsheba pulled her back, twisting her mouth into a cruel smile. Lorraine rushed forward, pressing the rosary to Carolyn's forehead. You are not hers. You are loved. You are a mother, and love is stronger than hate, Carolyn screamed, her body convulsing. The rosary seared her skin, smoke rising where it touched. Ed shouted the prayer louder, each word crashing like thunder. In the name of God Almighty, I cast you out. The house shook violently. Objects hurled across the room, slamming into walls, shattering glass. The storm outside rattled the windows with unrelenting force. Bathsheba howled through Carolyn, a scream so piercing it seemed to tear the night apart. And then silence. Carolyn collapsed to the floor, her body limp, her breath shallow. Roger caught her, cradling her against his chest, sobbing into her hair. Lorraine fell to her knees, clutching her rosary, her lips trembling with prayer. Ed stood above them, crucifix still raised, his body shaking but unyielding. But in the silence, Lorraine's heart froze. She knew Bathsheba was not finished. This was not surrender. This was only her last desperate grasp before the final strike. The farmhouse trembled as if alive. The walls groaned, floorboards splintered, glass cracked in the windows. Every corner of the house seemed to breathe, exhaling the stench of rot, the weight of centuries of hate. Carolyn lay limp on the floor, Roger clutching her, whispering her name again and again. But her eyes snapped open, suddenly black, endless, hollow. A cruel smile spread across her lips. Bathsheba was still inside. The girls screamed from the stairs, begging their mother to stop as her body jerked in Roger's arms. She twisted with such strength that she threw him aside, rising to her feet like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. Her head snapped unnaturally far, her mouth opening wide as a guttural roar poured from her throat. The air shook with it. Lorraine cried out, clutching her rosary. She's slipping, Ed! We're losing her! Ed stepped forward, Bible in hand, his voice thunderous. In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you, be gone! Carolyn staggered backward, her hands clawing at her head, shrieking in rage. The crucifix in Ed's hand glowed faintly, its light searing through the dark. The farmhouse erupted in fury. Furniture lifted from the ground and hurled against walls. A cupboard slammed open and shut violently, its doors splintering. Pots and dishes shattered across the floor. The storm outside screamed against the shutters, as though the house itself was a vessel for Bathsheba's wrath. Carolyn rose into the air, her arms outstretched, her body trembling violently, her hair whipped around her face, her feet kicking helplessly above the ground. Roger shouted her name, sobbing, reaching for her. Bathsheba's voice hissed through Carolyn's lips. She belongs to me. She has given herself to me. You cannot take her back. Lorraine rushed forward, pressing her rosary against Carolyn's chest. Her voice broke, but her words were steady. Carolyn, hear me. You are stronger than her. Think of your daughters, think of their laughter, their love. That is who you are, not her, not this evil, you. For an instant, Carolyn's eyes flickered. Tears welled. Her mouth trembled. Mama, the girls cried from the stairs. Please come back. The blackness in her eyes quivered. Bathsheba shrieked. Ed pressed forward, his voice rising over the storm of chaos. He lifted the crucifix higher, his words fierce, commanding, By the power of Christ, by the authority of his blood, I cast you out. The crucifix burned white hot, its light flooding the cellar stairwell, searing into the shadows. Bathsheba screamed, a howl that rattled every board, every window, every stone of the house. Carolyn's body convulsed, thrashing violently, her voice splitting between her own and Bathsheba's guttural roar. Fight her, Carolyn, Lorraine shouted through tears. This is your body, your soul. She cannot take what you will not give. The farmhouse shook as though an earthquake tore through its foundations. Dust poured from the beams, walls cracked, glass shattered upstairs. Then with one final scream, Carolyn's body collapsed to the floor. The air exploded outward, a violent rush of wind that snuffed out the candles, slammed doors open, and scattered debris. The house groaned in protest and then fell utterly still. Silence. Only the soft sobs of the girls filled the air. Roger crawled to Carolyn's side, gathering her into his arms. Her chest rose and fell weakly. Slowly, her eyes fluttered open. This time they were hers, tired, wet with tears, but hers. Mama? One of the girls whispered. Carolyn turned her head weakly toward them, her lips trembling into a faint smile. I'm here, my loves. I'm here. The girls rushed down, throwing themselves into her arms. Roger clung to them all, his face buried in his wife's shoulder, his sobs shaking his body. Lorraine fell to her knees, exhausted, clutching the rosary tight in her bleeding hands. Ed placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice hoarse but steady. It's over. Lorraine looked at him, her eyes haunted. She whispered, For now. The farmhouse stood in silence once more. But in the deep cracks of its cellar, in the hollow of its walls, the echo lingered faint. But there, the echo of a laugh, Bathsheba's laugh, a reminder that evil never dies. It only waits. And so for now, the farmhouse stands quiet. Carolyn Perron breathes freely once more, her children safe in her arms, her husband holding her as though he will never let go. The Warrens leave with weary hearts, knowing that battles like this never end completely. Evil does not die. It waits. Tonight, Bathsheba has been cast out. But in the stillness of that Rhode Island farmhouse, some say her laughter still lingers, soft, mocking, waiting for the dark to rise again. Thank you, dear listener, for staying with me through the long night, for keeping your lantern lit, for holding on until the end of this tale. I hope the story kept you company as the hours slipped by. This was The Conjuring Part 1. Tomorrow, we return for Part 2, where the shadows may yet stir again. Until then, keep your lanterns close and listen carefully to the silence around you, because sometimes silence is not empty at all.